know I think second grade on some of our spelling assessments, our green boards that we go through. Assessments 8 out of 15. Let's look at kindergarten in Torrington. For instance, our number bonds with 5s. For instance, we had one particular student who was able to get 1 out of 6 of those correct on the pre-assessment. And after the instruction, we were able to get 6 out of 6 correct on the number bonds with 5s. Out in Legal Fort Laramie, in 3rd through 5th grade, they targeted some phoneme manipulation. It sound and words. Out of 252, this was a whole, out of all the students, they got 252. They were able to be proficient on 209 of them, but so targeting that phoneme manipulation really using things. It just same type of thing in 2nd grade in Torrington around doing blends for our 2nd grade students. They were able to master 6 out of 15 at the beginning, and then 13 out of 15. I want to give a quick little shout out to our summer school staff at our attendance areas. In Torrington, we had Susan Keller teach kindergarten, Stacy John 1st grade, Jennifer Brummels, Stacy Fulmer, team taught 3rd grade, Jason Roberts, team taught 4th grade, and taught 2nd grade. Our classified staff was Ambrosio Chavez and Liz Green. Out southeast, we had Teresa Lobson teach K2, Beth Correa teach 3-5, and Tyler McFarland was there. Legal Fort Laramie, Sheila Bever taught 5th grade. Caleb Borshner and Tina Reicher taught K2. Their support staff was very upperside and children. I want to give a shout out to Dara Cunningham, who was my summer school secretary. 2nd year unit, she did a great job. Really proud of the people that wanted to take their summer to help support our kids. So, if you guys have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, middle and high school, summer school, Jacob Martin.
Good evening, everyone. I really probably don't need the mic, but I was yelling a little bit on the football field just a second ago, so I apologize. This literally came from a middle school football game. So I would first like to start off with saying a huge thanks to my staff this summer. Truly, without my staff, I'm not able to do anything that I'm supposed to do. At the middle school level, with math, they were able to split it. I had Lonnie Sorensen from Southeast, Mary Werner from Torrington Middle School, Tessa Walker from Torrington Middle School. Teaching language arts, they did an excellent job working with the kiddos. It was truly a pleasure to work with them. Additionally, in the classified staff, before Mr. Klein left, I was able to have him as a paraprofessional. Trisha Rodriguez was also another para that we were able to use at the middle school level. Secretary-wise, I could not do what I do without Melissa Lavoy. I could not thank her enough for the help and being able to keep my brain straight with what I had to do at work. Also, thank you, Nurse Wendy Lewandowski, for coming out of retirement and saving us during summer school and being our nurse. Just know that I appreciate it. Truly, we had a great thing going with middle school. We had minimal conflict and kiddos were there doing work. We had at least 50 kiddos that were fully participating in middle school, summer school from Goshen County. And our summer school did run from June 5th through June 29th, 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. Speaking about some of the curriculum of what kiddos learn, the language arts curriculum was developed by Mrs. Walker, and she primarily focused on learning and identifying parts of speech. All students became familiar with 8 basic parts of speech and learned how to identify more complex aspects of sentences. Students at all levels worked on IXL, practicing skills that are important for White Top and success in future language arts classes. for the math curriculum. Thank you, Mr. Derby, for helping us figure out things, and we were able to use CERN, which is being used in the district as a curriculum. Mrs. Sorensen and Mrs. Warner truly did an amazing job with using it. Every single day, kiddos had 30 minutes of digital math lessons that follow the scope and sequence of Eureka Math, Engage NY, and align with Wyoming state standards. All right, and truly everybody was completely passionate and really served our kiddos at the middle school level. Pertaining to high school, I was fortunate enough to, like I said, I'm going to shout out to my teachers first. In English, I had Kim Steiner. History, I had Mr. Kevin Derby. Math, Jody Disler and Aaron Estes. In science, I had Mr. Roger Spears. Truly, and a high school paraprofessional that I had was Mrs. Owens, or Miss Owens, I apologize. Without them, our students wouldn't be able to accomplish what they need to. It was a slightly difficult crew that we had at summer school this summer. However, my staff continued to persist in working with the students that came. Every single day, they had a smile on their face and were up to the challenge. 54 secondary students attended high school summer school, earning 49 semester credits. So if I break that down, that goes to science. In science, there were 11 semester credit earned. Math were 20 semester credits earned. English, 16 semester credits earned. And in history, there were 2 semester credit earned. Truly, I feel very blessed and fortunate to be able to grow professionally by being able to do summer school. It is definitely a little bit different than teaching in the classroom at TMS, where I teach 8th grade civics. However, it does allow me a tremendous opportunity to grow professionally, and I thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you.
Oh. Any questions?
All right. Thank you. Okay, now we have extended school year.
Hello again. So extended school year is a little different than summer school. Extended school year services, also known as CSY, are for students with IEPs who demonstrate regression, like they lose skills pretty significantly over extended breaks, and it takes them longer than a typical student to regain in the fall. So they're represented by their IEP team based on data that reflect throughout the year. And so this year we had 44 students who were recommended and 39 of those students attended, so that's pretty good. I kind of switched things up a few years ago. It used to be I get all the names of the students, I get all the names of people who wanted to work, and I try to build programs. And while it worked okay, kids weren't always with the teachers they had during the school year or the paraeducators who know the best. So I changed that a couple of years ago, and actually I have to thank the crew at Lincoln kind of put this together when we were doing COVID recovery services, where we were bringing students in for shorter periods of time, but it was one-on-one or two-on-one, so the instruction's more intense. So now what I've done is I put that back to the buildings to plan their services. So we had services starting from June 5th through the end of July, whatever date that was. So the 28th. So we had kids running for 4 weeks, we had kids running for 6 weeks. It was kind of whatever they needed. Some students only need speech services over the summer. So for those, this year we were fortunate because Jonette and Anthony wanted to work, but that's not always the case, which is where having Tammy and I as a backup has been really helpful. So those students only need speech services, we can deliver those services in the home. They don't have to bring their child to school, that type of thing. So we've had a lot of success with that. Can't really tell you data on how much students maintained, or for some students they need that extra time to keep learning, but it was a very successful summer. And then also there are quite a few students. We had about 250 students in IEPs this summer. Quite a few of those students are also recommended for summer school. So sometimes summer school meets the need for these students. So we had quite a few students with IEPs for summer school as well. So that's kind of extended school year in a nutshell. Any questions on that?
How many
Most students actually did were part of the members for the
I can get that data for you. I don't have that tonight, but yeah, we can sort that out. Because usually when students are recommended for summer school, I work with whoever the principal is that summer, and we go through and I make sure they're aware the student has an IEP, what their accommodation needs are. Maybe the areas, maybe they're a student with a learning disability reading, so we really want to focus on that. Or sometimes we have students who have some behavioral support needs, so we want to make sure we have the staff to support them. Or summer school has a nice advantage because the classes are much smaller typically. And so a lot of times we don't always need that extra support for that around like behavior supports because the numbers are smaller and Tyler and Jacob are able to staff in a much different way than the regular school year.
So if the need is there, then additional staff.
Right.
would be part of that.
And to be honest, it's one of those things we're still refining because in the IEP meeting, we're trying to have that conversation of does this student with summer school meet their needs? And of course, it's always hard because we're having a meeting right now. We don't know for sure what summer school is going to look like. We have a whole year's of growth for that student. But generally, we know we're going to work on some math, we're going to work on some reading. So if that's going to better meet the students' need, we try to go that route. But if they need something more intense, then we're looking at extended school year. Any other questions?
Thank you. Okay, number 4 is information regarding a petition received to rename the Goshen County School District tennis courts. This will advance to committee for consideration of recommendation to the board.
So I can speak to this. You'll notice starting on page 5, and you've had an updated application since the submission to the board packet for this application. Part of this process is then first reviewing this and then by consensus, sending it to committee. The committee is established of community members. Also, one board member and myself would serve on the committee as non-voting members. Of those committee members, then they will review the application, the letters submitted in support of that and the signatures, and review the overall criteria for naming a facility or a part of a facility after someone. And that is kind of contained a little bit in that information. If then 80% of the committee votes to move that forward, this would come back to the board as an action item in October to take a vote by the board in support of the naming. Does anyone have any questions related to the process for the initial application? Consensus to move it forward to committee. Heads. Anyone interested on the board to sit on the committee with myself? Mr. Saceda? Excellent, thank you. Trustee Saceda will sit on the committee. I would also take names of community members that you feel would be representatives on that committee. What I'd like to have is a committee of 8 people. The principal of THS will also serve on the committee depending on availability. The activities director from Torrington Middle School and the coach of the sport for that program will also participate as committee members for that naming committee. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move to letter B, which is our public forum portion. Please keep in mind there's a 5-minute time limit. Mr. Frank Aiken.
My name is Frank Aiken. I live here in Torrington, and I saw in a local newspaper when we were advertising for some positions that were open. The one thing it did not mention in that advertisement is that we do not accept written applications. They must be filed online, and I think that is restricted. I don't know when this policy was first introduced. Maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago before any people were on the board, but I think now the employment situation, especially here locally, has changed. So the potential employees have too many choices, and especially in those areas that an employer is deemed essential for the smooth operation of the business. The employment process in today's world is one of a mutually beneficial relationship, and I think that's a good thing. The competition here locally is very heavy for obtaining quality applicants. For example, I went around town and just asked some of the local businesses if they would accept a written application in person from a potential employee. Most of them said they would. For example, Burger King has a bunch of applications right on their countertop there, right as you order your meal from them. Main Street Market, same thing. I just barely asked them if they would accept written application, and she, the lady pulled one out of the drawer and said, "Here, fill it out." Not for me, but St. Joseph School, they accept written applications. So does EWC. So does Valley Christian School. I asked one of the local HR ladies here from one of the local banks, and she said, we'll take applications not only online, but in writing. And we kind of like those because they give us more and better information. So I think we should not rely upon only one source, and that is online, to receive applications from local people here that might be wanting to go to work for us. We're a people business. We should treat people like people and not just a glitch on a computer screen or a cold and impersonal entry into a database. That sends the wrong message, I think, locally here to anybody here that wants to apply in their school district. Because I take partial ownership of the school district, I ask myself, what can I do to help alleviate the situation? So I went downtown, Torrington office, right there on Main Street, and got a packet of applications. I'll leave them out here on the countertop of the desk, the lobby when I leave tonight this building. I'd like to say in closing that we might suggest our principals and department managers to occasionally say thank you to those employees that have stuck with us thick and thin through COVID, the blizzards in the wintertime, and have performed magnificently. And I'm talking about school bus drivers, the substitute teachers, coaches, maintenance, janitorial people, food service workers, and secretaries, and quite a few more, I'm sure. That's all I have for tonight, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Letter E, under recommended actions, is the consent agenda. Are there any items in this consent agenda which a board member wishes to pull this evening? Okay. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented this evening, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Number 2, new business. It's an action item regarding the executive session we had this evening for real estate. Do I have a motion?
I moved to accept the sealed bids for this position, grass area measured at approximately 1.4 acres, located south of the Green Elementary School, more specifically south of East.
Okay, do I have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of accepting sealed bids for the grass area out in LaGrange, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Okay, letter B is consider approval of special education contract with Northeast Wyoming BOCES for teacher of the deaf, hard of hearing services for the 23-24 school year. The recommendation is to approve the special education contract with Northeast Wyoming BOCES for teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing services not to exceed $16,335 from July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. This is funded through the general fund reimbursable special education. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the special education contract with Northeast Wyoming BOCES for teacher of the deaf, hard of hearing services for the 23-24 school year in the amount of $16,335, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter C, consider approval of offering a contract for half-time multi-tiered system of support MTSS coordinator for the 23-24 school year. The recommendation is to approve offering a contract to Randy Epler as a half-time MTSS coordinator for the 23-24 school year. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion?
Do we have a salary or a wage on this?
So what was sent was the previous so it's already was an existing position cut into half. And so when we have that contract, it's just half of that position, which was already there. We can go about the information on the contract. Marcy, can you speak to how that kind of works on the salary schedule?
We have our salary schedule. Typically, what you see is the contract, which is 1 week. And then the salary schedule is dependent upon the education and experience that the staff member holds. And then it would be halftime with that.
And what about that?
Because this is halftime, and this is a retired retiree, we would not have any insurance benefits associated with it. And as far as retirement, we would be working with the Wyoming retirement system, but if the employee, and a lot of this is personnel, so we have to be cautious of what all we communicate in open session. But with retirement, it depends upon if the person is choosing to collect retirement or if they're contributing to retirement. If they're contributing to retirement, then we're going to be responsible to pay that portion. If they're collecting from the Wyoming retirement system, then we're responsible to pay what's referred to as the insurance premium or the retirement premium.
Is this position still open? Mr. Kramer, can you speak to the significance of the MTSS coordinator? I mean, I'm assuming if you're bringing back a retiree, it's a pretty important position. So can you speak to the significance of it?
Absolutely. MTSS is multi-tiered systems of support. So each building is expected to have a strategy for meeting the needs of the different tiers of students. So we have classifications of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 students are interventions that might be, and I'm speaking in very general terms as the other staff members that are responsible for these interventions can speak more specifically to them. But a tier 1 might look like a 10 to 15 minute intervention with students, something where they're going over vocabulary daily, trying to really pinpoint that intervention. Tier 2 And these are all monitored then also. And then there's a piece of where it's reviewed on a 4 to 6 week basis. And then those team meetings look at those individual sessions or situations where that data is being collected and then make determinations based on those interventions. So very similarly to a medical model almost, where there's rounds by doctors being made, that same conversation takes place in regards to our educators for the needs of our students. And so the severity rises with tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And then of course the intervention or so treatment that increases with that. Now there's a monitoring practice that goes along with that. And not only are we focused on academic achievement, we're also focused possibly on behaviors and the interventions that might have to take place with that. So coordinating that across the district and having a system that actually aligns at the district level and to the individual buildings needs is really extremely important. And those who designed the literacy grant had specifically put language in that grant. In order to be a part of the literacy grant, we have to have provided a person to oversee MTSS across the district. This has taken some serious steps over the last 2 years at the district and how it looks. And we've had a much more seamless system in getting students through those tiered interventions. And then also what this allows us to do is take those interventions and then determine if a student's needs might raise to the level of an IEP or an evaluation. And we can take that data through that tiered system and use it towards making that determination if a student then should be pushed forward towards special education and those services that align with that. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. And I assume that given that Mr. Epler previously served in this position, it's going to take very little training or catching him up to the ground running.
That is correct. He really was instrumental in designing a lot of that first step that we had a couple of years ago and taking that to the next level that we had last year in the implementation process. And so everything is kind of sitting there. What we have found is with all of the other things our principals are responsible for, it's very challenging to keep those in addition to their other responsibilities focused and on par. And then also we have a lot of documentation that also needs to follow those students and where all that lives and who is then responsible for making sure if we need to have further discussions, we need to have somebody in charge of that.
Are there plans on getting a full-time MTSS coordinator?
Right now, based on what we have from the grant and where we were at from our work last year, I'm comfortable seeing what a half-time position will fulfill in regards to the needs of the district. There may be a case when we renew for the literacy grant is a 3-year grant, that there might be something that we would input to make sure we have a full-time, or it might be something as we rewrite the position that it might remain a half-time depending upon the needs of the district.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of offering a contract to Randy Epler as a half-time MTSS coordinator for the 23-24 school year, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter D, consider approval of purchase exceeding $5,000 for the purchase of Lexia Core 5 licenses for the 23-24 school year. Recommendation is to approve the purchase of 340 Lexia Core 5 elementary student subscription licenses, including on-demand staff professional development from Lexia in the total amount of $12,945, funded by Title I. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the purchase of 340 Lexia Core 5 elementary student subscription licenses in the amount of $12,945, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter E, consider approval of purchase exceeding $5,000 for the purchase of interactive screens. The recommendation is to approve the purchase of 9 new line interactive displays for district elementary classrooms from Blum USA in the total amount of $49,124, This is funded by Title I as well. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So I think with 9, there are specific classrooms that you're looking at.
Correct. So one of the things with the Title I funding, you'll notice from item D and item E, we were made aware about late August that we did have additional funding in Title I and that needed to be utilized by the end of September. One of these new line interactive displays actually were on our schedule to be updated through the use of general funds and technology. And so it was going to take place over multiple years. So rather than waiting to fund it out of general fund over a multi-year period, we were able to utilize Title I funds to address that need right away. And so yes, they have been on the list, but then it gets to be sped up quite quickly based on our Title I funding.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the purchase of 9 new line interactive displays for district elementary classrooms in the amount of $49,124, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter F, consider approval of purchase exceeding $5,000 for the purchase of district custodial supplies. The recommendation is to approve the purchase exceeding $5,000 for the purchase of cleaning and disinfecting materials from Bluff Sanitary Supplies for Lincoln Elementary in the amount of $15,191.15. Single Fort Laramie in the amount of $3,209.67. Torrington High School in the amount of $101. Trail Elementary in the amount of $11,134.60. Torrington Middle School in the amount of $4,475.98, and Southeast in the amount of $3,203.96. In the total amount of $37,316.36. This is funded through the general fund custodial. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion?
Why is it such a?
What I can share with you is that some of the buildings didn't order over the summertime, and some of the buildings had more storage than others. We also had some schools with vacations and things apparently orders just for some.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving district custodial supplies in the total amount of $37,316.36, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter G, consider approval of purchase exceeding $5,000 for replacement equipment for Southeast schools. The recommendation is to approve the purchase of a replacement drill press for $5,550.67 and a replacement Scotchman metal shear for $14,152.22 from Air Gas in the total amount of $19,702.89. This is funded through insurance proceeds. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the purchase of a replacement drill press and a Scotchman metal shear in the total amount of $19,702.89, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter H, consider approval of allowing Valley Christian School middle school students to continue to participate in Torrington Middle School athletic programs. The recommendation is to approve allowing Valley Christian School middle school students to continue to participate in TMS athletic programs. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, if I may, you may remember last year, for those board members that served on the board, us approving an agreement similar to this. What Valley Christian has actually just requested that we take off the year unless one of the parties would say to cease that agreement. And so that's why we updated it this year, just to have it going on a continuation until one of the parties would be interested in ceasing that arrangement. The arrangement is currently done very well for allowing students to participate in things at the middle school level.
Can I ask a question about that? Mr. Kramer, do the Valley Christian kids have to go to TMS for athletic programs, or can they choose from the 3 schools?
As part of the Wyoming High School Athletic Association, a school who wants to engage in agreement with another school has to pick one school in particular. So they wouldn't be able to enter an agreement with all 3 schools depending upon that. So Valley Christian is asked to, and they could actually request at a time period initially if they wanted to have Southeast as their agreed upon one, or Legal Fort Laramie as agreed upon one. What they felt is that Torrington Middle School, due to its location and the location of Valley Christian, lines up with where their needs are, and so they would like to have that agreement with Torrington Middle School. And so it would not be able to be individually determined by each individual participant.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving allowing Valley Christian Middle School students to continue to participate in Torrington Middle School athletic programs, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter F, topics for discussion. This is a time for board members to seek input from each other on timely topics. Number 1 is per trustee Hager's request at the August meeting. Board members are invited to share their motivation behind running for the board of trustees. Anybody want to share?
I'll go first. My short answer is a selfish answer. I have 2 kids in the Goshen County School District, and so I obviously have a very vested interest in the district's success because my needs go to school here. The longer and more altruistic answer is that after I graduated from college, my husband and I moved back to Goshen County, and I told him that I wanted to run for the school board someday, and there was an opening on the board, so I applied at the right time. And here I am now. I want to be a part of the work that's being done to ensure the best education for all of the children in Goshen County. I'm working to ensure that the staff in our district are provided with the tools needed to help every student.
Anyone else?
Okay, the reason I even thought about the school board is a few years back when we had COVID. And I'm sure everybody remembers when we were going through mask mandates and everything. And all the meetings, and I felt like the school board of the district had overstepped the bounds of their authority of parents. On asking about parents being able to take care of their own children and their health issues, and the school board didn't have the authority to tell parents what they had to do with their own children. And after I got involved in that, and more people started coming up with questions about where all this money was coming from the COVID and where it was going to, and what it was being spent on. Seemed like everything that was coming before the board was just a yes, no, nobody was questioning anything. And so I decided I was going to run the school board, try to provide some more transparency about what was actually going on and what we were voting on. Example is just like the grading system kept getting put on, and it seemed like we were just kicking it down the road and everything. Finally, the grading system actually did get put in place. Yes, I'm going to continue questioning things and looking and investigating things. If I don't understand what it is, it's just like this MT, this position was grabbing. I was like, I need to look that up. I found exactly what it was online, and it's position and what's required. And so I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to continue to let the public know what is going on and what I think they should know about and take a look at. And if there's something that I feel I need to look now on, I'm going to do some, I'm going to vote against it. And, so I'm just going to pray forward. That's why I'm here, is to investigate and make sure that our school system is doing what we our children and parents know exactly what's going on too.
Anyone else?
I'd be happy to. I'm in a little bit different position because I wasn't voted in. I was appointed after Mr. Peterson's spot came open. I think the primary reason that I wanted to become involved in the school board was I too moved away and came back, and I have 2 children and a niece and a nephew in this school district. And I can personally say that there was a woman in high school by the name of Jennifer Willis Bailey, then it's Jennifer Cole now, who literally changed my life. And the reason she changed my life is because she chose to teach to excellence. She didn't teach to standards. She didn't teach to what she was told she had to do. She taught to excellence. We hated her class. It was a love-hate relationship because she did push us so hard. But I attribute a lot of my decision to go to law school and do what I do now because of Jennifer Cole. I wanted that for my kids. I still want that for my kids. I think it is so important for this community that our teachers have advocates, that they have a voice as well. I sat through a lot of school board meetings before I was on the board itself and felt as though there was a gap there and that the teachers needed to have a voice. To be very candid and transparent, I wanted to be part of the solution. I didn't want to just come on the board to challenge everything. I literally wanted to be part of the solution. I think it's great to ask questions. I think we need to have answers to those questions, but I want to be part of the solution. The other piece was, it's not really my style to sit back and complain. It's more my style to get involved. And I think that our kids need to see that. Our kids need to see us sitting up here. Our kids need to see us being involved and advocating for what we think is right or wrong and trying to do it together. So that's why I wanted to be on the board.
Anyone else?
So, yeah, I'll go. It wasn't actually, I lost track of that topic. So I really had prepared myself for that question. What I need to say is initially, a position opened up, and I applied for it. Initially, because I was asked to do this. I was a little reluctant just because of the fact that there were some areas that were very familiar with. But again, I had to actually kind of step into being comfortable to actually grow. And I've done that. One of the things that I've actually learned in my time here, and I've actually made this to be a goal, because I think that our teachers, I think our district, we have some very good teachers, we have some very good things happening here within the district. The representatives today, they were talking about the fact that in reference to excellence, I too believe that we set that standard for our kids, but I also want to make sure in the 7 kids that I actually have go through the district, sometimes our kids, because of the standards, because of the achievement tests, they put a lot of pressure on themselves to achieve. And that achievement sometimes creates a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure. And I think that's important for kids, but I also think it's important for our kids to be able to understand that they're kids. And it's a time for growth. It's a time for them to be able to develop into young people where they can contribute in different ways. So one of the words that I hear a lot of is we have to actually kind of think about diversity. And when I'm talking about diversity, that's kind of a kind of complicated concept because I agree with diversity, but I want to take it one step further. And I think that going from and being mindful of diversity, it's more important to actually talk about inclusion. You can have two people in a room, and again, there's going to be diverse in their perspectives and their thoughts and ideas. And again, unless you specifically identify where it is that diversity is going to actually go, and that mindfulness of being mindful of that diversity of where you want to go, that inclusion piece is extremely important. And so it's not just about diversity, it's about being included. So my goal is to be able to be a voice, not only for teachers, community members, students, parents, but to be able to bring us all together to understand that if we are going to focus on diversity, ultimately, we have to strive for inclusion. So that's
Few of us that have got on very cold, so I'm sure if we were to answer ourselves. I have time when we have. Still, to that then, I guess one of my main reasons was I felt that just a lot of the majority needs and wants in the district and students. Just basically without that with majorities wasn't sometimes changed. Especially lots more personal. I like the team aspect of what I thought the school board was going to be. Still, let's strive to want to create a better team. We'll have different ideas and thoughts on how to go about it. My goal would be to we can all agree where we want to get. Still don't think tackled that yet. Like today versus older gentlemen has been on all kinds of boards, and I was explaining to him, but when I go on and say, oh, that's you're gonna sell it. A lot of teams inside the room. So, school board is required to see that. Oh, at the time, just everything works within the state, within different rules and regulations. Voices to it. Challenge. Mayor's no, I have 3 girls, so I wanted to do it to make a difference to them and all the students and teachers in the district. Yes, I like to get involved in the community. I like to stand up for right investment for students. Staff of the district.
I guess for me, as a parent, that is more of my responsibility. In part, I help out. And that's it.
I'll go last. So I got on during COVID, like several of us did. My perspective of this whole thing has changed dramatically in 3 years now. And I got on, I have 2 kids, one's in school now, one will be next year. I got tired of sitting around complaining about everything and everything that was wrong. I wanted to, or what I perceived was wrong. I want to be a part of the problem or the solution. And I don't know if I've accomplished that or not, but I definitely have a better understanding of how a school board works now. When you get into this deal, you have, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. There really is. There's a lot of things that come at you. And it definitely pushes your comfort zone at times, and especially in the past 3 years, definitely has. But it has been a very good experience, and like I say, I want to be a part of the solution, however that looks, and it varies from issue to issue. So, yes. Okay. Number 2, for my request, set dates for community roundtable work sessions at district attendance areas in conjunction with board strategic planning and leadership governance training. So I guess the biggest thing is we need to figure out dates that work for everybody to do community roundtable or several community roundtables. And I don't know where we want to start, or anybody has any suggestions?
Are there certain days of the week? I was going to bring up the calendar, obviously. The likelihood of avoiding conflicts is slim to none, because we have something going on every night. So that is something that we will try to avoid. But one of the pieces that I think would be nice to do is coupled along with those listening sessions would be a work session, where we could also invite the Wyoming School Board Association to work with us within that strategic plan development. As I've talked to Brian Farmer from the Wyoming School Board Association, they do have a plan for what they've seen and visited with us, and would like to kind of put that into play. That would probably be dependent upon their availability, but also I think in setting that, we could either couple along that with a work session or not, kind of dependent upon their availability. Typically, Tuesday and Thursday nights work better, but that is also something that there are conflicts due to other activities too. But if we wanted to align it to something like our work session, typically what we have done is, being that the second Tuesday of the month was our regular board meeting, we usually looked at that fourth Tuesday as our work session. If that's something that we could take a look at for this month, that would be the 26th. It looks like Southeast, if we're looking at, I'm just kind of seeing some nodding ahead, so I'm just going to kind of go ahead and start with that. If we look towards the 26th, looks like Southeast does have a varsity volleyball, and does look like Torrington has volleyball. I do not see anything for Lingo Fort Laramie, anything. So if we would like to hold one at Lingo Fort Laramie on the 26th, if that's something that we can kind of tentatively put down, if Maureen can kind of get that down, we can also then take a look. Typically what we've done is work sessions have started at 6:30. Does that typically work for everybody? Okay. So we will hold our first one on Tuesday, September 26th in Lingle. And Mr. Gilchrist can take a look at a space that would be useful to that. Obviously, the cafeteria is what we used in the past, so that would be great. Would we like to set the others at this time also? Or work through that?
I think let's start with that. Okay. And go on, I think we're getting too far down there.
No,
I think let's see how it goes. First one, go from there.
excellent.
Could we send out how we did that?
Yeah.
So, 'cause I feel like last time.
We also didn't have, as many, now we have a lot more forms of communication that are refined, so we should be able to hit that. But if I could also address Mr. Gilchrist on that for band and for your Facebook page, we'll do that also, we'll hit it on the district-wide one too. Fantastic. Thank you for the suggestion.
I would just like to say that, this is a one, try to keep it as close as possible, because once we start getting into this is gonna be.
There'll also be some more opportunities too, once we get past that September, it starts to spread out a little bit easier on some of our activities also.
Maybe we can send it next one.
That's a good idea. That sounds like a great idea.
I do not want to make this meeting longer, but just so this is gonna be super brief. With the new 4-day school schedule, there were some growing pains here and there. And one of the things that I have been approached with is that the wait list for after-school programs was incredibly lengthy and kind of onerous. So I asked Mr. Creamer, I don't mean to throw him under the bus, but I asked him to look into it because some of the things that I was being told is that like one particular family had a kiddo that was on the list for 2 years. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that is a really long time. And that's obviously not, we're not meeting those goals that trying to help families and so forth. So if Mr. Kramer could speak to that wait list for after school programs, and maybe speak to as well as like how it is going now with the 4-day school week, just so that we're all on the same page.
So what we have is a wait list at 2 of the Torrington schools. We do have a wait list for Lincoln of about 9 students, and then I believe at 4 for Trail. We've been very fortunate, even before the 4-day school week, this was something that was a commonality. This is not just due to 4-day school week, it's something that this program has been very successful, and we're very proud to have it. I have, on that end of the spectrum, I have received very little feedback. I have not had anyone come to me with concerns related to childcare and those type of things. We are still very new, and so this is very early on, but as I've heard through the community, they've made adjustments as we make adjustments in our families when we have Christmas break, when we have Easter break, when we have summer break. You know, families have kind of adjusted to some of the needs. And sometimes it's easier on some families than others. Obviously, we know how that kind of sits. We will be having our second intervention extension Friday, this coming Friday. I'm excited about that. Hindsight being 2020, one of the things that we will not recommend for next year's calendar is to have an intervention extension Friday on the first week of school. What happened there was we had a number of things, kind of teachers and students getting to know each other and trying to catch up and figure out who should we invite to intervention, who should we have to extension was a little bit more difficult. I think this one will be a very more telling number of students that we have in and actively engaged with teachers. I'm really excited about what I'm hearing with some opportunities I'm seeing in my own family, some opportunities in regards to intervention and extension, and just things that, because our kids are in so many activities, especially at the high school level, when is their time to get in there and meet with the teacher and see the teacher? Because if you have practice after school and you don't have necessarily transportation at the ready to come into school in the mornings, it becomes a little bit more difficult where that opens up the schedule. I heard some really neat things that I'm going to share here shortly on some of the extension opportunities that we have coming up for kids. I think those will be really, really exciting opportunities for kids. One of the things that you also see and how it relates to extracurricular activities was last Friday, and even the Friday before that. At the 6-man and 9-man level, because there's such a shortage of officials, it is becoming almost a necessity to hold the games on Thursday nights or Friday afternoons. And by having those Fridays set out, it's allowing our activities to have some of those things that usually interfere with school, as they did last Friday, because we had a full day Friday, not interfere as much as they typically would. As I talked to Mr. Williams, who works very closely with the scheduling officials, a likelihood that we're going to be moving away from 9-man and 6-man football having to play at those times is highly unlikely based on the number of officials that we have. Also for volleyball, typically our tournaments are on those Friday, Saturdays, and that has allowed us. I'm very interested to see about semester. What I'm going to have is Dustin run a report for us where we do have the data when a student is gone in a school activity. It is identified, but it's not an attendance piece where they are attending because of an excused absence. But I'm really interested to see how many students are going to be in class more often and able to be accessible, as opposed to the number that we had missed at those semester times. Based on what I've seen also, we've had a number of things going on related to just the activities and the intervention piece and how that extension is going to fit into the different levels from K2, 3, 5, middle school, and high school. One of the things that I really was envious of is Torrington Middle School, and I think some of the other schools have done this a little bit too, but I can speak to that more specifically. They got kids in through their activities, their involvement in volleyball and football, because they either had a morning practice before that, and then kids stayed for extension opportunities, or because of some of the extensions with physical education, they were able to come in there, and then they were also able to do a science lab. And some of those things of getting kids in that non-structured environment is really exciting, because as Trustee Saucedo referenced, we have this academic piece, which is extremely important, the stress that our kids put themselves under, and the stress that we have as adults in that system. But also, school needs to be a place where we're having fun learning, and there's an active engagement to it, and we want to be a part of it. Because I can think back to, I was not a big fan of high school in general as a student. I did not like it. I love the social aspect of high school, but I still love that building. I loved going to that building. I loved going to that gym. And that was a part that I still, even driving by in Rapid City, driving by Stevens High School, there's a familiarity with that building, even though I haven't stepped foot in it in over 30 years. Well, not quite. We're not quite to 30 years yet, but getting closer. And so I want to see that for our kids. And so if they're having those experiences on those Fridays where there's intervention and extension in the teachers that we can still talk about, and even reference of why we became a board member, that's what I want for our kids. And with that extension of opportunity, especially outside of a 44-minute block, what we have on Monday through Thursday, and they get 2 hours to spend with a teacher, what a great opportunity we have to really extend some learning and some things that, yes, we still have bugs to work out. There's still going to be some things as we go through this Friday and then throughout the year that we're going to say, you know what, we need to make a change if we continue along this direction. But for the most part, I think as referenced by our student representatives, they feel that they support it and feel very strongly with it. We even have, as I referenced, board members, kids that were not as pleased to go through on one of the 3 Fridays we have. They thought that was a little bit unique, but we'll kind of continue to work with that. And from what I've heard from the teachers too, there's support still to maintain what we're doing.
Absolutely. So you were talking about the after school program, correct? With the events?
Right, and what I understand is that it starts over every year. There's not like a continuous wait list, and the registration forms are timestamped, and that's how the wait list is determined. So the primary purpose of the electronic registration is for those types of programs. So that's why timely registration is so important. Does that make sense?
My question was, it's based on student enrollment, correct? Is the funding they get for the under school?
As I understand it,
Practice program? It's like some pieces never have enough interest to justify it, so why can't we get more funding for trying to constantly have this?
So I think it's still based on the need of the community, and it's just like within Title I. Even though we have a lot more needs in Title I that we could use more intervention dollars, there's only so much that can be allocated even when there's a demonstrated need, that we have to still have those limits and set forth where the highest need is. It's a good question.
Any other topics for discussion? Board members? Okay. Letter G, future meetings. The next regular board meeting will be Tuesday, October 10th at 7 p.m. And with that, we'll go to letter H, the superintendent's report.
So the first item that I had to discuss was the update on current enrollment. And what I have done in the past is just shown very simply through green and red where those enrollment numbers look. And as we kind of progress, you can see LaGrange has gone up slightly. We have had a decline at the Fort Laramie in the high school, a slight decline of 7 students. One thing to keep in mind, we're still very early on that average. And so there is don't plug in your computers. I plug the technology person, so hopefully it'll hold up a while. But we have through Lingle, Fort Laramie Elementary, you can see as we progress down through Lingle Fort Laramie Middle School. I'll go through it, but as I scroll down, once we come up again, we do have a decrease at the district level of approximately 21 students and where we are at. So what we will do is we'll continue to closely monitor that. If you remember last year, we had a significant increase. And so where we are slightly down from that number, but it's my hope that we'll have some increases followed by that. My computer is loading and I'll bring it back up, but I want to go down to my next one, which does not require my computer. Last week, take one and pass it on. I attended the Wyoming School Board Association regional meeting up in Douglas. And this is a yearly meeting that I would really encourage any board member, if possible, to attend. One of the biggest pieces with that time in which you have to meet, they really go out of their way at that regional meeting to set up contacts with other board members. And during that meeting, they had a lot of roundtables and we rotated and we got contact information from other board members who were present and things from other districts. And it was amazing to me, the number of board members that were experiencing the same issues. I mean, we're so close in proximity, so close in experience and size for so many of them that we're all experiencing the same things. We're all having those same questions. And by having that person at another district, for you to be able to reach out and ask them questions and get a different perspective, I think is valuable. And I appreciated the time being spent there. The item that I handed over to you was a part of the packet that they handed out. And one of the biggest things is the advocacy for a Wyoming School Board Association. And this is your organization. One of the pieces that is really instrumental this year is that it has representatives, other board members fill the board of the Wyoming School Board Association. So what they're advocating for is your voice. And if you, as you read through these items and read through this material, if you do have other ideas that you think would be things that the Wyoming School Board Association should advocate on, or if you have strong support for one of those current items, or if you're in opposition to that, please speak up. Because if you have those feelings about something and you, just like I heard so many of you say, you want to be part of that solution when you want to be a board member, use that voice to advocate to this organization. Because they really tried to drive home is that it isn't Brian Farmer, the head of Wyoming School Board Association, who is the chief. He's not the driver of this. It is you as board members in control of what should be advocated. Just like very similarly, the superintendent's role is to advocate on behalf of the district through your voice. And when you guys let the superintendent or we let Brian Farmer know what our interests are, it's going to be a better representative model than just having one individual. And so I would like you to look through those. We'll have further conversations as we progress. And have we heard anything on what the dates of the conference are for the Wyoming School Board Association? Okay, so it'll be, so in November, I believe it'll be the third week. The Wyoming School Board Association conference is held in Casper. If you can get even a portion of it, I would again recommend that. Trustee Chairs was able to attend last year. Do you have anything to kind of speak to that as we kind of look forward to that on the value of that
I
conference?
think it was very valuable, and I think, like you said, the main reason we made the collaboration with other districts around the state, and what they have going on and how they're tackling these issues is really just that piece, and there's a lot of issues.
And even if for a portion, it's perfectly fine. I mean, do not feel, I know your schedules are very difficult, and some not even possible. So I don't have that lofty expectation, but I know that meeting with other board members and kind of that collective understanding of what you're having to face is reassuring in some cases, especially for those other board members too. The other aspect of that is if you are interested, they do a great job with the financial reports and analysis. And when I talk about the financial reports, looking at very specifically LSO members, Craig, and final fiscal profiles. If you're at all interested in those financial reports, I can certainly get you a copy and explain some of the pieces to that, or have you talk to Marcy, who will be able to actually explain that much better than I can. I'm just gonna jump real quick just back to this, where I had to make the 21. One of the interesting aspects of this is you'll notice our senior class at THS, we have 58 students. You'll also notice that we have 108 freshmen. That's a really interesting dynamic as we kind of put that in that high school for multiple reasons. And so that's really interesting as we take a look there. They are up as a building primarily because of that 9th grade. You'll also notice PRS does have significantly more students. Also, you'll remember PRS does primarily about 95% of the student body are THS students or former THS students. One of the interesting things there that kind of is important to realize, this is a percentage of students on where they're taking courses. So for instance, a PRS student, and I don't have this in front of me, but I know a large number of those students take courses at their home high school. So a portion of their value is going back to, like, for instance, if a student is taking courses at PRS and they're considered a PRS student, but they're taking 2 of their 8 courses in CTE programs, they are getting a value of PRS of 0.8, and then THS are getting a value of 0.2 for that student. So students can be partial when we look at that number. An example, in 8th grade at TMS, 83.72 students how do we get 83.72 students? How we're doing that is there's a portion on the attendance, and that's why attendance is so important for our students to be present, is Wyoming is very, very closely monitored on students' daily attendance and then their average attendance. And so that's why, even more so than any other state around us, where there's usually typically a count day or a count week where you're funded, we are funded on that ADM, our average daily membership, not a strict day where we had, it used to be October 12th in Iowa, where we needed all the students there and make sure they're accounted for, because if they came on October 13th, you didn't get funding for that student. Wyoming is just very more closely monitored on throughout the year. Our funding follows that. And so this is changing regularly, but I'm kind of interested to see. We've typically not given this report in September because we do an August, September combined average, which is more accurate. And so when we get to October, we'll have a little bit better accuracy of, is that 21 really where we're at, or is that going to fluctuate up to where I hope it will end up to be about 1632. One of the things that I had this year that we are working on is Constitution Day. You'll remember I had a community member ask about Constitution Day last year via an email that I shared with the board, and my answer in regards to how we address that throughout the school year in regards to Constitution. What I asked Mr. Gerby this year was to really focus, or have a focus during Constitution Day, which the official day is taking place on September 17th. When school is not in session, but throughout that next week, then we are working on celebrating Constitution Day within the district. And so every principal submitted to me their plan of what they will be doing. And I'd just like to kind of share some of the plans that I have from each building. And at Lincoln Elementary for the kindergarten on September 18th, they're gonna work on birth of the Constitution, and then looking at an activity surrounding the American flag and talking about a classroom constitution. And then in K through 2, they're talking about the preamble. They're making a collage and paint materials in regards to the art activities that they're going to be doing on September 18th. Then in music at Lincoln, there's going to be a brief discussion and review of what the Constitution is from classroom learning. They're going to talk about the Constitution listening song, and I'm going to absolutely torture this name by Frere Jacques is another, and I'm not going to attempt to sing the song, but the lyrics are on here. And they'll also be doing some movement routines with that. They're also in first grade going to be working on a reading book within a leveled reader and the activities surrounding that. And then in second grade, they're going to talk about the Bill of Rights and the first 10 amendments and working on the activities surrounding both there. Then at LaGrange, on September 18th from 3 to 3:40, the whole group will meet to brainstorm what they think the Constitution is and what is a symbol. In K through 3, they will go to Mr. Daly's room and read the book America, a Patriotic Primer by Lynn Cheney. And we will discuss what they learned about symbols, suffrage, and the Statue of Liberty. In 4th and 5th grades, they'll go to Mrs. Gifford room and read the We the People, a story of our Constitution. And they will also discuss symbols and suffrage and the Statue of Liberty. Then at THS, during Blazer time, they're going to work on resources of the ideals of the U.S. founding documents. And then the other one will be, let's see. Second one. And that is going to be the choices on, that's the ideals. So that's the students read excerpts from the U.S. Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and Bill of Rights, and consider the importance of the founding documents to our nation's history. At Trail, They are working on enrichment activities that they're going to create posters from the quotes of the Constitution that they will post around the school. And then on Monday, September 18th, at the beginning of the school day, they'll have a short program on the Constitution, and they'll be playing music to the Star Spangled Banner over the intercom while the students sing the song in their classrooms. They will also have a dress-up day with kids wearing patriotic clothing. Then at PRS, Mr. Derby is going to be the guest speaker at PRS to talk about the Constitution. And then at TMS, they are doing a 40-minute activity creating a student bill of rights on school issues. The objective is for students will quickly collaborate to identify school issues and create simplified student bill of rights based on school experiences. And so that's what they'll be working on. I want to jump over to my last one. And at Lingo for Laramie, Mr. Smock and Mr. Baker are creating a program that they will show to all students through the week of the Constitution, the week following Constitution Day. So as you can tell, a lot of unique experiences. I just want to make sure I did this. And Mr. Williams out at Southeast, Mrs. Bates is working on enrichments for kids for this Friday, September 15th, for our K through 6 students. And then on the 18th, we'll have a program for 7 through 12. And they are going to look at how they can kind of enrich opportunities for education on the Constitution. So as I referenced, a lot of different varying activities based on the level of students, but a lot of learning going on based on the Constitution Day and September 17th. Then the next item, I guess I want to pause for any questions before I go on to my next one on school performance reports. So I'm just going to share again my screen. Different. So you may have heard about the school performance reports for traditional high schools. And these came out last week, and they are a report for each individual elementary, middle school, and high school and alternative school that we have within the district. And I don't know when the first year that this took place, but this is the report for Lingo Fort Laramie High School. And what you'll see when you go to these reports on Wyoming Department of Ed, you'll notice up here in the corner the year, and then the district, and then you can select the school. And then you just hit run report. And so you can get each one of these. What primarily is one of the features of this, I'm gonna see if I can zoom in, is this tag right here. And primarily what we're looking at is where it talks about WAEA school performance rating. And anytime you see green, that's where they're meeting expectations. And then you're looking at this average indicator score. And what this score is made up of is a number of factors that I'm going to scroll down to. Also within this block, you'll notice the graduation rate, 4-year on-time graduation rate. And I'm just going to get on a kind of a tangent here, but one of the challenges that I think we have in education is that has been one of the biggest indicators, 4-year graduation rate. I wish we'd actually completely get rid of it. Because honestly, in my opinion, I don't care if it takes you 4 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years. My goal is to have you have a diploma at the end of whatever time period it takes you. There's no set time period that we have to have students. We do have a limit on the age of 21, but a diploma by, if you heard and attended PRS's graduation ceremony last year, we were able to have a 21-year-old return after they had dropped out for, I believe it was over a year and a half that they had been dropped out. They had actually already started a family, And one of the biggest factors that that student said in their speech at graduation was the factor that they needed that high school diploma, because as they looked at their family and their young child at home, of how important that was. And that really illustrated to me that this is really nice to know that number, but it shouldn't be a determining factor on the success of a school. And I feel very strongly about that, and all of our kids having access to being able to be a graduate. As I scroll down, you'll notice we get a little bit more specific on what that number means. So there's a number of different factors that go into the school performance indicators: growth, equity, achievement, ELP, and this is English language learners. You'll notice that at Lincoln Fort Laramie High School, they do require a number that is a needed minimum to actually get accurate data. So you can see in our schools, we don't meet that. That's where you'll see the NAA. They'll also extended graduation, which again, I think should be completely replaced in the 4-year graduation. So I appreciate the fact that that is a factor. But again, you'll notice that the 4-year on-time graduation is there too. Post-secondary readiness. This is another indicator that we've talked about administratively. Post-secondary readiness deals with 3 different factors. And one of them being career ready, which is the CTE piece, where we have what are called concentrator courses in each area. A student needs to take 2 concentrator courses and pass an industry-specified assessment to be considered career ready. If they're not career ready, how are they college ready? This is determined by factors of the YTOP and the ACT data. Primarily for college ready, it's determined on the ACT data and other courses being taken. Then there's also the piece that isn't mentioned there is military ready. And this is where we have students take the ASVAB. You may ask or may be approached by some parents and sometimes, why does my child need to take the ASVAB if they have no interest in entering the military? One of the things and aspects of is the ASVAB gives a very good indication of students on a different platform than a standardized assessment. It is a standardized assessment, but it is standardized not necessarily to the Wyoming state standards, but also learning opportunities and what can be progressive. So when a student can achieve a certain score on the ASVAB, they can be considered military ready in addition to being college and career ready. And so that's why it's important that we do have our students working on that and taking advantage of that opportunity. The other one that we have that's an indicator, that's an interesting one, that isn't focused on a standardized assessment is the grade 9 credits. And what the state looks at is at the end of 9th grade, what percentage of your students are receiving 25% of the expected credits required to graduate. So this is kind of an indicator after freshman year, how many of your students are going to be on-time graduates? And that's one of them. You'll notice the words here. This is a lag indicator. So these are previous years. So this is not just last year's data, it's even the previous year's data. So that's one factor as we look like it's very difficult to forecast what this might be in immediate terms. So for instance, if this was based on last year's data, which might look primarily different, this might not meet the target. So this is the high school one. And then I'm gonna see if it does switch over. This is going to be no, it's gonna be your traditional one. So in our elementary, it's a little bit more difficult to find exactly where those students, it's not as cut and dry on where they are able to access that information. So I'm going to jump over to here. So it's the same type of thing, it'll just jump into the elementary. And it only will give us the box in this one. And the first one that will come up is Southeast Elementary. For the elementary and middle school, they don't have the breakdown of boxes in the next pages. It does talk about long-term school goals and interim targets, but it really gives you this box here. As you can see, Southeast Elementary exceeded expectations on there. What I want to just jump back real quick is to this report right here. I'm just going to jump over to Lingo Fort Laramie Elementary. And here is their breakdown. You can see where they are partially meeting the school performance piece. And then also it breaks down then meets targets, below target, met, above average in the growth. But there's not the factors, of course, of the freshman credits, the four-year graduates. Those don't play into account on the elementary and the middle school ones. If you have further questions on this and how to kind of get more information, I'm gonna go to a simpler screen that I've kind of worked on to display some of this achievement data. And this is kind of a simplified version, but I'm gonna just focus on that colored box right there at the bottom. So you'll notice this goes back to 17-18, 2020 and 2021. We did not have rankings because we did not take the lights off, which is a big indicator for these. This is the 22-23. Blue is the exceeding expectations. As you can see, Southeast Elementary exceeded expectations. LaGrange met expectations. Lingo Fort Laramie Elementary, Trail, and Lincoln are partially meeting. Lingo Fort Laramie Middle School is not meeting current expectations. Southeast Junior High is meeting expectations. TMS is partially meeting expectations. Southeast High School, Lingo Fort Laramie High School are meeting expectations, and THS is partially meeting expectations. So one of the biggest factors here, this is another great tool to utilize in analyzing how we're doing. Is it the only tool we should use? No, because one of the things that I heard you talking about was why you became a school board member. Not one of you mentioned to specifically improve Y-top scores, which is a piece of what a successful school could be. But it is absolutely not the only piece. Just like this data here that we're looking at is a piece to allow us to analyze where can we improve. But it is a end all be all of a successful school. Absolutely not. It's an indicator of successful students coming out of a school. No, absolutely not. It's very similar to the way I look of how we look at society in regards to defining success. We used to have a more clear definition, I guess, that I'm glad we moved away from, was a four-year college degree was an indicator of success. That certainly has not been the primary driver that we have in our schools right now. And rightfully so, because defining success on one strict abstract is not what our kids need. Our kids need a lot of different things and a lot of different tools to analyze the success of our school. Can we have guardrails along that, as Trustee Hager has talked about, in defining what things do we want to utilize to see if we're going in the right direction? Absolutely. And we should strive for that. But looking at some of those pieces and taking analysis and setting goals is really important to those. One thing, as we kind of see, we can see a number of schools that were, not meeting or partially meeting that have moved up, and that's something that we're really proud of. Now I want to kind of show also one of the factors or pieces that we look at, and I'm going to share next month, hopefully some web data. This is our YTOP data from this last year. And one of the things that I like to take a look at is cohorts. So we start taking the YTOP in 3rd grade. And we have what I call a cohort is when they take it in 3rd grade in math, what is that cohort and the percentage of students that are proficient in 3rd grade, is that increased to 4th grade? One of the difficulties that we have is that we have a population where there's a lot of movement. And so we might have 5 to 10% of a grade level move. But overall, a good amount of those students stay with that grade level. And to take a look at that is a good factor in determining how our success is. So when we look at the elementary grades of 3rd, 4th, and 5th, one of the things that I thought was very interesting as we look at elementary math, 100% of those grade levels, this would be 4th and 5th, they improved. They actually improved the number of students that were proficient. Middle school, 66% of those grade levels. In high school, 50%. So overall, of the grade levels in math, 71.43% of our grade levels improved the number of students that were proficient. That's something to be very proud of. Can we do better? Absolutely. Should we strive for 100%? Every year we should strive for 100% and expect that. And that's where we need to work towards. ELA, the different set of data in regards to 50%, 66%, 50%, and 57.14% of our English language cohorts have improved. And then we look at the total, when we combine ELA, math, and science, 75% of our elementary, 66%, 50%, 64.29%. So you can see there are more grade levels that improve every year on the YTOP than do not make improvement. What we're trying to define administratively is to take a look very systematically at data. One of the things you'll hear next month that we'll be getting a lot more involved is our Ames web data and the authentic assessment that is. One of the pieces that is really primarily the data that I look at for our reading information. And it is really interesting to take a look at how we focus on specific classes and specific students to create those interventions that I referenced on MTSS for students to improve and where we show that academically. So we'll talk about that next month, but I wanted to kind of give you a synopsis of our school performance reports and a little bit of the YTOP data. Any questions on the data information?
I had one basic question. How is simple, but how is the graduation rate? What is the formula?
So your time clock when you enter 9th grade starts. So for instance, 108 students entered THS. So whatever that percentage graduates in, I'm trying to do my math real quickly here as we go, in 2028, that will be our percentage of 4-year on-time graduates. Does that make sense? We hover around, as a district, we hover around, let me just go scroll to my data real quick. As a district, between 87 and 83% 4-year on-time graduates.
So then this, like, subsets of graduating seniors.
Correct. One of the interesting pieces of data that we will see as we work through every current senior of those 55 right now that entered this fall has in their schedule the ability to graduate. So because of our acceptance of the 20 credit option, we will, in most cases, many of those students will even have a plan. it would be you're coming back in 5th year. The likelihood of students coming back in 5th year drops significantly. Should that be a plan for some students? Absolutely. But one of the exciting factors is, and this is certainly the first time that this has happened in a long time at THS, that every single senior there has a plan based on their course load and a reasonable course load to graduate and walk with their class this spring. So that's something that is encouraging, that will be kind of disproportionate when we see those numbers, like you referenced. But I call that, if we're coming in for a senior year and we're showing up and we have a plan and a route to go do that, and that's one of Dr. Porter's goals, is to really increase that graduation rate. To see that plan to fruition is going to be really exciting. When you look at Lingo, Fort Laramie, and Southeast, it becomes more difficult based on your end value too, of your percentages, because if you have 3 students out of a class of, for instance, not last year's graduating class, but the previous graduating class was 13, that really throws your percentages off, and you can have some real high peaks and some real low valleys in regards to that. Last year, we were able to have 100% of Lingo Fort Laramie, as referenced on there, graduated 4 year on time. Previous to that, it's been kind of interspersed through those averages. The average for the district, as I referenced, when I go back all the way to 2014, our average in the district is 84.57%. THS's average has increased the last 2 years, and actually been above 80% the last 4 out of 5 years. Their average is 80.12. Lingo Fort Laramie's is 93%, and Southeast is 95% graduation rate for a 4 year. Other questions?
Can we go back and look at the table for the white top that you put together?
Sure. Yes, when we get to a place that.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I'm just giving you a hard time. Just give me a second.
I just wanted to make sure that the way I was reading it, it looked like at least half of the schools were either not meeting or partially meeting expectations, or whatever the method of measurement was. And so, I mean, to me, just simply looking at it, that's pretty concerning. And what's the plan? Do we start to do something about that now? Or is there some significant lag time in addressing that?
So one of the big factors there is when we look at the increase and how many of those, for instance, just looking at that data, until we were fortunate to have a class at grade level, have 95% of their students proficient. If we look at this chart next year, even though the average for 5th grade, the state average is 50% of a class will be proficient. That class at 95%. You can see how they far exceed the state average. In this cohort, they still, even despite that, that's why those measurements, that data is really kind of can be skewed, unless we're looking at both how many of our classes were over the average, state average, and if they didn't achieve over the state average, how many of them improved as a cohort. So you add those multiple factors in to kind of get an analysis of where we're at. One of the biggest factors that we're looking at right now, or I've been looking at the last couple of weeks, is are we seeing a tendency at certain grade levels where there are either high achievement. One of the pieces that is very interesting to me is 8th grade math across the district is typically the highest percentage of students proficient of all grade levels is in 8th grade. This was the first year in 4 years that wasn't the case. And the other factors to not only look at that are what happens in that freshman year. Because if we are teaching just to that 8th grade piece and not having those building blocks to progress and prepare for the following year, we have to kind of get and ask the question, are we teaching to the standards on the Y top? Are we, can you speak to those focuses on the Y top and how those? Right, just real quickly, I mean, in layman's terms,
So essentially, like the white top, we have our teachers looking at that now, and I think that's gonna be a continuing push is to align those things, like we've talked domains, like if we're talking ELA, it's like main ID and evidence, like that is a huge portion of that test, and so that is something that we're really, really working hard to ensure that not only kids have exposure to that, but repeated exposure to that, that we're not just, it's like a one and done, but no, this is repeated. We want to see proficiency. We want to see mastery of those particular things. The math standards kind of change as you move from K up through high school. Obviously, once we reach high school specifically, Algebra 1 is the major focus for 9th grade. Geometry is the major focus for 10th grade. That's not to say that those are the only things on the test. Something we found just kind of reference of looking at Y top and standards and trying to align to those was that we had a huge gap in, it was like a ratio and proportions in regards to a 6th grade now. So we've worked to try and address those. I think we're in a better place now than we were several years ago. So we're constantly looking at those as well. And the states maybe kind of done us a solid there, and they're working to do some things as far as identifying performance standards, which is essentially saying, we've had people come and go over the years, but like if you were to teach all the ELA standards to their fullest potential, you'd probably spend 23 years doing it for time and justice. So the fact that they're making a concerted effort to narrow those down, that's also good. We're also trying to keep a pulse on that and make sure that we are hitting those targeted things that are useful.
One of the biggest factors also, to kind of more specifically address your question, is as a board, what are we saying we need to focus on? What is it, because right now it's Kevin and I and administrators talking about, I think YTOP is a good tool to use to indicate the possibility of success. This board has not necessarily defined what we truly feel is the definition of a successful high school, middle school, and elementary. We have plenty of data points just like they're up there. We have a lot of data pieces. Is that an easy question to answer? If you looked at it very topically, yes. I mean, it's simple. The problem is that once you start developing in it, we need to have a lot of tools in our toolbox. There needs to be a social emotional aspect of it. There needs to be a determination of how many of our students are comfortable in our schools. How many feel that 4 years, 5 years after they've left, we gave them the building blocks to be successful? How do we incorporate a graduation survey into that information? All those factors need to be something that is agreed upon for the board to focus on, and we expend our resources on those things to make sure we're getting there. Because right now we are administratively looking at YTOP data, Ames data, but is there the ownership at the district and all over throughout that we know? No, there is not, and it makes it more difficult to see improvement if there's this shotgun approach as opposed to a real refined approach of here's what we want to really define as our factors, and we're going to review those monthly. We're going to review those on a 6-month basis. We're going to review those on a yearly basis. Those things, and I think we can go back to what Wyoming School Association talked about on what do successful boards look like and what do successful districts look like, and an agreed upon goal of those is a huge factor for us.
That's what we're doing with the WSP, so that's part of the strategic planning. To create that path.
the challenge is gonna be, there's gonna be 9 strong opinions on what success looks like at that, and how do we use those tools? Because again, this is one tool in a large toolbox. We have a significant amount of data out there that we can use to determine that factor. Extracurricular involvements is another one. I mean, all of those things are components of what we want to look at.
So for the next step, this board relies on WSBA and the strategic planning to determine and define success.
To tell us how we want, to give us the map or a set of guidelines for what we want. That's great. So we'll work with WSBA and tell us steps that we can choose to take to work together as a board and start these conversations to create that.
My only concern with that is like, right? I mean, when meetings after meetings, if we're not accomplishing that for our kids right now. But that's my concern.
Just to add to that, Lena,
Yeah.
this is something we've been working on since I've been on the board, since I started on the board. And every board, every configuration of board has a different idea of what they want to see, I mean, every one of us, our definition of success in our kids is going to be completely different. And so, but like I said, since I've been on the board, this has been something that we've been working on and working towards. This is the closest we've got since I've been on the board to actually coming up with a plan. Before this, it was a discussion that we had, but we never went to these lengths. And I don't know how long it's been, Carlos, since we.
Yeah, and not again, that where we're nothing focused on except for that. That was 2 years where it was just like, okay, nothing like this was being discussed. You know, and I guess my thing is, you know, I think that these conversations of where we want to go are important. The graphic kind of concerned me was, and again, you don't have to put it up, I don't know. Where it identified every individual school on years, and then it was either partially met, not met. That graph. Okay. So again, it's important to talk about where we want to go. But my concern was that one because it appeared that year after year, there were certain schools that were either partially or not. And I guess that's right now my concern. Do we need it? Because sure, it's important to actually look at where we're going. But right now, if we have had schools where year after year after year up to this point, I'm not meeting those expectations. Let's focus on the meeting. That's where I feel right now we're getting it. We're going to start at least having conversations, strategic plan, you know, all that. But that was where are we going to go right now with achieving that goal? How we get that those schools?
Well, one of the factors also has to be the conversation around, is that the right tool to use to analyze if that school's successful? There are parts that I wholeheartedly agree that should be factors in determining the success of the school, but there are factors that are instituted on a standard-based test. I don't think that should be a part of that and defining that. And that's the difficulty is there's going to be huge factors in what we view as success at those schools, but it's important that we kind of have those conversations to define them and come to an agreement on what type of factors have to be part of that analysis. We can take that tool and we can use it, or we can dissect that data even further to add another component of it and say, you know what, we need to look at these 10 different data points here. And we need to say, yes, this met, or this is improved.
But okay, so let me ask you this. You know, I guess maybe this is my frame of thinking, but mean, whatever it's being used, again, this is my opinion. I don't believe that not meeting, partially meeting is okay, you know, at least, you know, we're showing you. But we're showing some growth, not meeting is not acceptable, yes. I guess that's where I'm a little concerned is that if we're not meeting, we have to actually, for next year, we have to have some growth on that. Right? So, I don't know if I can that, but after 2, 3, 4 years.
That's not how we're gonna get to this state. It's not just where we're going, but how are we gonna get this? And how, you know, I don't remember, I didn't do this, the school district is like a ship, but we can't just turn on the dime. Nothing that happens in the district happens overnight. If we want high 7th grade, in 2nd grade, it's really late. To change something, I mean, it's not gonna happen by tomorrow. For readings, so it would take the entire year. And so I think that goes for all of our schools and so like you said, Lena, it is unfortunate for students that need to see those changes right now. But as a board, we can't, as a district, we can't change it right now. We can just make it.
And I hear what you're saying. I just to add on to what Carlos was saying, the most concerning thing to me was the pattern of not meeting. Like that is very concerning to me. To see that many not meeting or not, you know, partially meeting as a pattern, as opposed to, yeah, you have a year where you're partially meeting and then the next year you meet. Great. It's the pattern of seeing that continuing that is incredibly concerning to me.
So one of the things that I think is really important is to, when we want to use a tool, we have to completely understand it. And to say that I completely understand that school rating system, I do not. One of the biggest factors, and I don't know if it was Trustee Chairs or Trustee Muller, that we had the conversation on, there isn't a tool to take that information and dissect it student per student. There's not an easily accessible framework where I can go on this computer and say, Jimmy, if we focused on Jimmy, Johnny, and Susie, we're gonna really increase our score. There's not that ability, and again, we have the lag of multiple year data. And so that's a nice indicator, but it isn't an immediate indicator. It's one of, we'll get results 3 years after we've implemented something on that report. So to say that trajectory is concerning, yeah, I absolutely would not disagree. To say that's a reflection on the work that was done last year at those schools or even the year before at the schools is not. I mean, because I know some of the work and some of the things that have gone into that, and I do foresee some improvement being made along a lot of those lines. But one of the factors that, and was an interesting conversation this last spring, we sat down with our MZ representatives for Fort and Gillingham. We looked at the AIMSweb data just from spring. And we looked just specifically at the data. And we had conversations around the percentage of students that were reading above the 40th percentile on comp and oral reading fluency. And there were a number of teachers that we knew that were, when we broke it down by the grade level, working extremely hard, implementing the program exactly like we had intended, but still not getting the results that were reflected on AIMSweb. And so when we look at those things on how can we have this classroom where we know what we're implementing is of high quality because we see it across the district. We also know that one of the factors in that information is the students within there and the growth that they're seeing. What are the other factors that we're not addressing and asking those questions? And so I think we have to be very careful to say lag data is on time data for some of the things that we're seeing. We have to break it down to where I talked about what are the important factors on a monthly basis that we want to see as a board? What are the improvements that need to be monitored and how can we see those? And then what are our long-term pieces? Because the long-term is, yeah, long-term goal would be to have every school meet those or exceed those expectations. But that's probably a 5-year plan. Because that's when we actually see the implementation of what we do this year and next year actually come to fruition. And that's gonna be the difficulty of finding those data points too.
Is the whiteout just once a year and it's always this time of year? Or is it
Spring.
Spring, so this is last year's.
Yep, this is last year's.
I just had a quick follow-up. So we just said this meeting for the 26th or whatever, this just only around. Associated with.
We're gonna see if their availability to see if they might be available for that start. And see if that could be fitting into that work session. So that was the goal, along with that roundtable. So what we had in the past is an hour set aside for the roundtable, and then the next part of that would be what can Wyoming School Association set us up to get it on moving forward if they're available.
Just on that aspect of it. I just want this to come process. I don't want to blame on anybody here, so. I'm board members and all 10 of us equally. It's just me, but. We've had this conversation. Last 2 years. And we always say, well, we'll go down to it, we'll have something, do something, we'll schedule. I'm sorry, it's all of our fault, but we never moved past that conversation. In 3 years, we haven't. And I don't think it's that difficult. I don't think we need, step one, I don't think we need WSBA to tell us a roadmap on how we need to define what we want for our school, our community. My opinion, I think we should schedule a single work session, all of us come in here and we talk amongst ourselves, how do we want it to look like? I'm sure we won't agree with something like that, and then present that to WSBA. I think if we just keep going down the same trail of asking everybody else for help, us just waiting, I think we're gonna keep waiting. If we have to. It's not.
I don't disagree with you. I see that
Or do you want to start? I mean, that's why we do this here, right? So you don't even know where to start having this discussion, because there are so many other things that are very strong.
Yes, I don't disagree with you on that either, but you know,
My
I
concern,
think it's good, so I think they're super good at what they do. I just, they're gonna wanna come in with a pamphlet and say, here's the steps. You know, like I told them, that's just, I don't think we're there. That's just like, it turns out we can't even have a conversation, so we can't have it here, how are we supposed to have it? In there. I don't know, I'm just saying, we've talked about it. I just, I would put it off. We're passing it to them, say, come help us with this. With.
Can I posit just one thing for you guys to consider, and maybe some, I don't know very well personally any of you, but like when Mr. Kramer and the admin team, when down to the law conference in Laramie, you know, which was sponsored by WSBA and whatnot, but we didn't get to hear like the state, some representatives from the state board, they talked about the profile of the graduate, which is a big push, I would say, at the state level. I don't know your familiarity with that, but I think it addresses some of what Mr. Kramer perhaps has talked about somewhat. It's not only an academic piece and that achievement piece, but also, you know, what do the CTE programs do? What do the military and some of that readiness do? Maybe that's even a starting point for you guys to look at. I'm not saying you adopt that full sale. Like, I would never be one to suggest, yeah, let's just grab the first thing and let's call it ours. But that might be at least a starting point. If you take a look at that, a lot of work has been done into that from this state. Different districts have certainly looked at that. Maybe start there as to what you like, what you don't like, what can you agree on, what would be a focus for the district of where are we currently hitting some of those benchmarks versus where are we not? And at least might be a starting piece for a framework that you could come to some kind of consensus, perhaps.
And I guess that's how I think diversity is that reading into the because they work reports across the state that are facing similar issues. So people us think this is how it works. So.
Is there any way we can ask them just to speed up the process, say, you know, just go along here? Ask them, hey, what are 5 conversations how we can start? If you guys aren't available, we can start that.
The other side of all of this is that there's 4 of us that are still on board when I got on board. We had a huge amount on this group, so that makes sense. That's not at all I'm saying. It makes it hard to have a long-term plan when
I totally get all that. All I'm saying is forget all of us right here. Kids that are gonna graduate this year, do the math on their graduation. Go ask them what. How much they have to.
Let's ask them and let's ask the administrators, like, I don't know if that's like taboo that we can't do that, but why aren't we asking like what's working, what's not working, what, you know, where are the pitfalls, like, can't we have those conversations now and also use that as the tool with the WSBA? And maybe I just don't know enough to.
I mean, it's not like, and we discussed that the first year I was on board. We're doing it around this annual, she's credit, we have to put things down here. This year having that process. Where we can find out what the needs of our schools are, it can be integrated. And I know that we did a lot of work on those roundtables that then got into.
I thought that was really summarized it all and then go bullet points.
And that was my understanding of the graphic story, like, see, better, the goal was to do it every year, so people will expect that. And we have that open line of communication.
I just think that was to me, I look at the mountain as that's a neat schools.
But is that how the board decides on it? I feel like there are really 2 sides, not the same thing, but they work together.
It's about doing things with you. And that's that's the whole. That's not kind of like what I see it is that roundtables are, we're putting together. This is what we hear, this is what we feel. Let's put it together.
That's my thing, so there's the next round table, the fourth round table. So there's 4 steps to the round table. That's step 1. Yeah, kind of, but
But, I mean, in our last.
Work sessions, yeah, work sessions, you can.
So if you recall, I did that information from previous. That historic. We have some of that. And here's some information. We're going to hear some of the same information. So. To why we couldn't start from that. I see what you're saying, because we're just together. But.
If we couldn't, I think that was the intent, right? So we're going to use all information.
But we're going to add student information.
Do you think the strategic plan is impact? I mean, it's not a one-time thing.
It is. Once we talk about that.
Again, I guess my understanding was the roundtables help with strategic plan, but aren't necessarily because. I'm sort of very tired. But so like the roundtables were something we wanted to do for the community, forget the strategic plan. But the roundtables. Does that make sense?
So I'm gonna be honest with you. My whole intent with the roundtables were to get community involvement and have us be able to, talk to the community, and the teachers, administrators, whoever wants to come. But it was more about getting feedback and being able to discuss things. That was the whole purpose.
And that's, I guess, the thing is something we can go to Lena's point because of the fact that I'm going to go back to that in that, we have heard from the community as far as what they might be here or see the district look like. I guess the piece that I'm kind of missing is hearing from administrators as far as, because right now, we're talking about that is being taken from their buildings. What is working, what's not working, what do they feel is beneficial to actually keep, and what do we cut? Because they're the ones that, in my opinion, at least for a lot of my decisions, I take guidance from them to say, yeah, this is working, this is not. So that's a piece that is on this. I do feel that community roundtable work for it, but I also feel that there's a different piece that just is there.
It's all about communication. That's the whole point of the roundtable.
I go back to, again, it's doing things with people and to people. And we're partners in this. Okay. They should be at the table, be able to say, okay, yeah, this is what I think, this is how I think.
I feel as though
though it's a safe environment, right? Like, we're not coming in saying, you haven't met the expectations, these two, what's going on? No, it's like, no, literally, what is not working? How can we use the word help you? I don't know. To me, it just needs to be more of that back and forth. But I did not need to open this can of worms. Just
Remember we
that.
said you didn't want to make the meeting long?
I know, right? I know, sorry, but seeing that graph, and I get that it's just one measure of, how to take a look at this, though, that's concerning to me. It just is.
So then if we are going around saying that we look
I think we have principals and all.
The challenge that we're gonna have is those conflicts from the other administrators that may be with those activities. Because Torrington High School and Southeast have varsity activities going on in the evening. Okay. I would certainly expect, just like the last time, I would fully expect the administrators from those buildings or if it's hosted will be attending.
Tonight, we could start with Mr. Daly, since he's still here.
Okay. So I do have two more things that I want to talk about. Yeah, I'm not done yet. These will be quick though. Southeast Insurance has been consulted on Southeast and the Sunday morning hail event. Skylights, other pieces of that building have been affected. But I think we're going to be all right on the roof, possibly from initial, just looking at it, but there will be some things we'll have to make a determination on insurance for that building. Then the other, I just want to throw out some statistics, and I appreciate the feedback in regards to our application process and those types of things. One of the pieces there, and I did after our August meeting, talk to our people in the office, and if anybody would have not have access to the internet or would have difficulty, we'd be happy to help them at any point in time if anybody would come in. There is certainly not the determination that one size fits all. But I also want to put some statistics in front of you for just certified staff members. And Maureen has gone through this line by line because actually as a part of a subpoena that we're involved in at the state level, we are not involved in the lawsuit, but we are a school, and so we have some information that we need to share. It's dealing with the application process. Since 2021, just on certified staff member applications, we received 729. And when we look at those other businesses in our community, they're probably talking about 300 or 30 employees. We have over 352 employees that we have, and we're filling those. And then we also have five different sites where those are going out. So to have paper copies going in and out and things, it's not reasonable to think that can be accomplished, but we are always welcoming and have accommodated anyone that has needed that assistance. Also, I heard at Rotary, I went to Rotary on Monday, heard from Christine Brady, and at the Goshen County Library, she talked about all the things that they do also to help out anybody that needs to have any internet access, that we can accommodate those. So it might not be perfect on the paper pencil, but we do have accommodations that we've made for people in the past. So, and that's everything I have. Sure.
Thank you. I just would like to add, throughout this process, we have one applicant who they often apply for more than just one position. If we have a paraprofessional position open at Lincoln, at middle school, and in Fort Laramie, there is great advantage to having online, because what they do is they apply for one and then just with 3 or 4 suggestions. They've also applied for multiple paraprofessional positions. So that's a very, very large advantage for those that are working on it.
Thank you all. That was great.